Hi there, I'm Cathi Barker from Software Solutions, and this is the first of a collection of videos that accompanies my Level 2 course, which I like to call Functions, Charts and More. So the whole theme that runs through this Level 2 course is that we have a whole lot of data, and I want to introduce you to a variety of functions that you can use in Excel to analyze that data. And then once we've got those analysed results, we then need to present that. And so that's when the charting comes in. Functions, charts, and the and more bit is just all the stuff that surrounds creating data analysis and charts, including things like protecting your spreadsheet and applying conditional formatting, etc. So let's get started. The first thing I want to show you is a topic called absolute and relative referencing. Now with your course notes you will have received a file called Excel2, which I have in front of me. I'm just going to press the function key F12, which allows me to save the file as a different name. And I'm just going to put it on my desktop and call it copy of Excel2 and save. Now this particular topic, absolute and relative referencing, requires me to go to the sheet called referencing. I'm just going to hold my control key and use my mouse wheel to wheel forward and just zoom in so you can see as clearly as possible what I'm up to. What we need here is a formula. We need a formula that resides in the cell C6. And this formula is to grab the first quantity in A6, which is 10, and multiply it by the first price, which is $39.95. So I'm going to start by pressing equals, which is near my backspace key. I'm just going to click on A6. Times is the star, so I'm going to use the star or the asterisk on my number pad, and then click on B6. So I've created a Billy Basic formula which basically says grab the first quantity and multiply it by the first price. Now when I press enter, I end up with the answer $399.50, which is correct. So I click on that answer, I put my mouse in the bottom right corner and I double click the thin black cross, which automatically fills the formula down. You could drag the thin black cross, but it's so much quicker to double click it if you want to go down the same distance as the information in the column before the column you're in. Okay, now I want to actually look at the formulas. I'm going to take you to formulas in the ribbon, and I'm going to take you about 3/4 of the way across the ribbon to a button called Show Formulas. Now when you click on Show Formulas, irrespective of where you're clicked on in the spreadsheet, you will be shown all the formulas in that sheet. And as I click on each formula, you can see that the A6 is relatively adjusted to A7, A8, A9 and A10, and 11 as it's gone down. And the same is true of B6. B6 is relatively adjusted to B7, B8, B9, B10 and 11 as it's gone down. Now that's Excel's default behavior, and most of the time that's exactly what we want Excel to do. But there are the odd times when we don't want these cell references to relatively adjust. So let's address that. I'm going to turn off the Show Formulas button, and I want to put another formula, this time into D6. In D6, I'm going to press equals. I'm going to arrow to C6, press star, and I'm going to arrow up and over to B3. So I need a formula that simply says grab the sales figure in C6 and multiply it by 15% sitting in B3. Now here in New Zealand or Aotearoa, we have a GST charge, which is very similar to a VAT charger in the UK. And that is if we buy something, a good or a service, hence the G and the S in GST, a good or a service attracts a 15% tax. So goods and services tax is GST, and we pay 15% on top of any good or service that we purchase here in New Zealand. So the GST component will be $59.93. That is 15% of $399.50. Now if we click on this result and again double click our thin black cross to work out all the other GST figures, we end up with a dilemma. We've got some odd figures, some very high figures, a 0 and an error. So your first reaction shouldn't be to delete or to change necessarily, but to examine what the problem is. When you go to the Formulas tab, we talked about the Show Formulas button and how that shows the formula. But there's also a shortcut key, Control tilde. Now tilde is immediately below the Escape key. So I hold the Control key and I hit the key below Escape, and that also turns on and turns off my formulas. Let's look at the formulas. The first formula is correct in that it's grabbing C6 and it's multiplying it by B3. But then the next formula, if I click on it, is grabbing the next sales figure and multiplying it by B4, and there's actually nothing in B4, hence why you're getting 0. If I show my formulas again, the next formula is grabbing C8, which is correct, but it's multiplying it by B5, and B5 is not a value, it's the word price, and that is why you're getting an error that says value exclamation mark. So I think we can safely conclude that the C6 changing to C7, C8, C9, C10 and 11 is fine, but the B3 is not allowed to change to B4, B5, B6, B7, B8. It has to stay as B3. So how do we resolve this? Okay, first thing I'd do is I'd say turn your formulas off. So I'm going to hit my show formulas button or control 2, whichever you prefer, and turn off your show formulas so you're seeing the answers or the errors. Then I'm going to press Control Z or hit my undo button, which undoes the filling down of that formula because that formula is not correct to begin with. Now we need to make a modification to this formula. You could either double click the answer 5993, you could click up in the formula bar, but I'm all about doing things the fastest way possible. So I'm going to press the function key F2, which is edit. Whether you double clicked or whether you pressed F2 or whether you clicked in the formula bar, you're now in edit mode. And that's why in the bottom left of your screen, it actually says the word edit. You are in edit mode. And now we can make a change to this formula. I want to apply dollars to the B3 and my cursor just happens to be sitting near B3. So if I press the function key F4, it applies dollars, a dollar in front of the B and a dollar in front of the 3. Now what the dollar means in a formula is it means lock in the B, because there's a dollar in front of it, and lock in the 3, which means that the B's not allowed to change and the 3's not allowed to change. If I press F4 again, it locks in just the 3. If I press F4 again, it locks in just the B. If I press F4 again, it takes it off. And if I press F4 again, it puts it back on. So F4 cycles between all the permutations, lock in the column and the row, lock in just the row, lock in just the column, lock in neither, or lock in both. So leave it or get it to this point here. You can type the dollars if you're not a shortcut key person, but if you're doing this a lot, which we will be in this particular course, F4 becomes very useful to quickly apply dollars. But anyway, we've got the change we're after, so we're going to press enter. When we press enter, we still end up with 5993, same as we had before. When we click on that result and then double click the thin black cross to fill it down, we get sensible results this time. When we show our formulas, what we see is that the effect of the dollars is it's to lock in the B and lock in the 3. So C6 is multiplied by B3, C7 is multiplied by B3, C8 is multiplied by B3. The C6 is a relative cell reference. It relatively adjusts. If you fill it down, the row will adjust, and if you fill it to the right, the column will adjust. But the B3 is now what we call an absolute reference. It absolutely isn't allowed to change. It will stay locked at B3, whether you fill that down, whether you fill it up, whether you fill it to the right or fill it to the left. So I hope that makes sense. And I'll turn off my show formulas. The next thing I want to do over here is work out 10% of the sales figure. So equals the sales figure times 10% sitting in F5. That is my formula. But before I press enter, I think to myself, if that formula fills down, I need C6 to go C7, C8, C9, 10, 11. Awesome. But I need the F5 to be locked in. It has to be an absolute cell reference. So at this point, I press the function key F4, and that will lock it in. So when I press enter, I click on it, and I double click the thin black cross, I get sensible results, because each one of these sales figures is now multiplied by 10%. Let's do it for 20%. Equals the sales figure multiplied by whatever percentage is sitting in G5. Press F4 to lock that in and press enter. And that is 20% of that sales figure. I can then click it, double click the thin black cross, and it goes down. And lastly, 30% equals the sales figure times the percentage sitting in H5, 30%. Press F4, lock it in, press enter, and there's 30% of the sales figure. Double click the thin black cross and fill it on down. If I hold the control key and wheel backwards just to reduce my magnification a little bit, and then I show my formulas, what you'll see is the B3's locked in, the F5's locked in, the G5's locked in, and the H5 is locked in. There will be times when you create formulas and part of the formula you'll want to not change, you'll want to lock in, and that is the purpose of the $sign. I'll turn off the show formulas. The beauty of this design really is that, and I'll just zoom back in again, is that if GST changes, and it will, then we can change it in one location and everything recalculates. So for example, if I need to update these GST figures in column D, because now GST is returned back to 12.5% like it used to be, 12.5 goes into B3. As soon as I press enter, all the GST figures change. If GST goes back to 10%, if GST goes back to 0%, but most likely it'll be 15% for a while. So the beauty of this design is that people can go to one place and change a variable and everything recalculates. Same with the percentages. Let's say that I decide this particular client, I'm not going to give them a discount of 10, 20, 30%. Instead, I'm going to give them 5, 15, and 25. And immediately everything recalculates. Put it back to 10, put it back to 20, and put it back to 30. So think about the way that you design your spreadsheets and what would be the best way to design it so that people can change variables. So a couple of takeaways from this chapter. F2 is the shortcut key to edit a cell. At the moment when I'm sitting on a cell, for example, the bottom left of my screen, which is known as the status bar, says it's in ready mode, so it's ready for me to start typing. But if I press F2, I'm now in edit mode, which means that I can change what's sitting in a cell. Another takeaway from this session is F4. F4, when you're editing a formula, allows you to change the dollars applied to a cell in a formula. Another takeaway was to double click the thin black cross rather than drag it. Especially the longer the distance, the more useful that becomes. The other thing I think is to show formulas. When you go to formulas, there is a show formulas button on the formulas tab, which literally shows and hides your formulas. Doesn't matter where you're sitting. If you want a shortcut key, it's Control tilde. Hold the control and tap the key under escape. And tap it again to show and hide your formulas. What you may notice, I've actually added the Show Formulas button to my Quick Access toolbar. That's very handy as well. If I right click, I can remove that button. And if I right click this button, I can add it to my Quick Access toolbar. So always feel that you can add any buttons that you like the look of to your Quick Access toolbar so you have quick access to them throughout this session. Please like, please subscribe, please come back. I've got some really good stuff I want to show you. Ka kite.